Yo guys, my name is Destruct, and today I want to talk about Battlefield 1, which was announced on a live event yesterday, with its first trailer and developer discussion afterwards. Now my first reaction to Battlefield 1 was quite negative. I thought there would be little room for customization, variety in weapons and vehicles, but I am coming around to the idea after watching the trailer multiple times and hearing what the community has to say. I'm excited for the game, but I feel like there's an issue with the future of Battlefield. The last two games, either from the Battlefield franchise or from DICE, have been steps into unfamiliar territory, with Battlefield Hardline, for example, a cops and robbers spin on the Battlefield series, being one of the biggest failures in gaming I have ever seen. Then, Star Wars Battlefront. This was enjoyable, but completely overhyped with a lack of actual content to play. Both times these games were announced, people were saying it's going to be the next big thing, but they turned out terribly because DICE went out of their comfort zone and couldn't pull it off. Both times Battlefield players have had to go back to Battlefield 4, and I'm worried it's going to happen again. If Battlefield 1 turns out to just not work and not be enjoyable, then we're all back on BF4 once again. And that game came out 3 years ago. It's getting outdated, and we need a new modern day military themed Battlefield, in my opinion. I've said in speculation videos about the next Battlefield game that it would be a good idea for DICE to create Battlefield 5, just another modern day military battlefield, before they take another big risk, so then next year they could experiment with a new era. This way, if Battlefield 1 fails, we don't have to go back 4 years to Battlefield 4, we get to go back to a truly next-gen and beautiful Battlefield 5, which would have Battlefront graphics and epic gameplay. It's too much of a risk for DICE to keep trying new eras and new settings and failing. I like the sound of World War 1, but if they screw it up, Battlefield 4 is starting to get old. Now actually on to what Battlefield 1 might look like, the idea itself. World War 1 is an interesting era and could really spice up the traditional Battlefield gameplay with stuff like trench warfare, improved melee combat, horseback gameplay, and also more competitive gameplay. And what I mean by this is that, for example, there's going to be slower aircraft with only machine guns and sort of larger bombers, which will take more skill to maneuver and aim with. There aren't going to be lock-on missiles and flares, for example. It's going to be all about accuracy and skill, not active radar missiles. Also on the ground, anti-air combat is going to be machine guns and shrapnel instead of lock-on stingers, which means it's actually going to take some skill and some accuracy to take out aircraft in the game. Trench warfare looks really interesting in Battlefield 1, as long as this mechanic allows both long range and close combat. For example, trenches could all be connected, with trenches being parallel to each other, with some no man's land between them, and this could be for long range players, but then there could be sort of tunnels connecting the two parallel trenches, which could act as choke points for close range weapons and melee combat. Imagine Operation Locker choke points on the C objective, but with only a few submachine guns and mostly brutal melee weapons like shovels, maces, swords and clubs being used. It would be much more interesting than the choke points we have in Battlefield 4, where anyone attempting to push through gets mowed down before they've even reached the other side. These choke points in the new game could be a lot more competitive and interesting. Now touching on horseback combat, this could be quite difficult to balance, especially on maps with focuses on trench warfare. Using a horse to clear out a trench would be a viable option on a real battlefield, but in this game it could definitely be frustrating for those on the ground in the trenches. I would say horses should be kept on open maps exclusively. Now, if you actually try and imagine it, you could probably imagine a bunch of troops lined up in a trench, and just imagine that guy just on a horse, just smashing through everyone. And I don't think this would make for very good gameplay. Now, one final thing I sort of wanted to talk about was, wanted to point out to anyone who hasn't noticed this, but in the trailer the song used is a remix of Seven Nation Army, so perhaps that suggests that we're going to get a lot more factions in this game. Maybe the British Empire, Russia, Ottoman Empire, German Empire, Italy, United States, Bulgaria, Austria, Hungary, maybe even Japan. But I think it would definitely create an amazing spectacle to have a lot of nations in the game, perhaps not fighting for an individual country, but having allies and the Central Powers, and within those two sides, players can customize their character by choosing one of the countries they want to represent. And since there is less customization in Battlefield 1, we know that as, there's most likely going to be less weapons and less attachments, and, that's not going to be stupid stuff like gun skins. But players could actually customize their character and their appearance. So choosing a nation, your facial appearance, and clothing. That way the game can still have plenty of customization, but in a very different way. That's all I wanted to cover in this first impressions of Battlefield 1. I'm excited by the game, but a little skeptical as it could very easily go wrong again, and I've literally played Battlefield 4 to death now, really hoping they will do a good job. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of the trailer for Battlefield 1. I will see you guys next time. Peace.